Well, hello there. It looks like we have a different situation this week. We have Bible, Bishop, Betty, and
Bestie.
Right. Your name's not Bestie, though, is it?
Victoria.
No, but that's your best. I know. So that means, once again, Bible, Bishop, Betty, and Bestie. But there's something else here this week that I've never seen before on this show. Now, let me think if I can figure this out. There is something different about you. You, Betty, something's different. Well, what is it?
My hair?
Here,
Oh,
look.
yes, it is my hair.
Your hair, you got a haircut. I can see your hair's a little bit different. That's true.
Okay.
Let me think. Betty,
Oh, wait.
are you able to see me? Do I look okay?
Yeah.
Do I look better than I did last week before you started wearing...
Glasses.
Oh my goodness, glasses! Now, what's so really remarkable about this is I think you went to see your cousin in a musical today, didn't you? What was the name of the musical?
Junie B. Jones Jr., the musical.
All right. And what was one of the things that happened to Junie B. Jones in the musical?
She got purple glasses and I have purple glasses.
Oh,
but these are my backup. I have blue glasses.
Well, it's very important that we share things. In fact, let's look at out the people this week out there. Have you gotten anything new this week, or has anything happened to you this week, folks? Well, I wish we had time for you to tell us about it, but let us know because we really care.
But comment if something has happened.
If something has happened, you call us according to Betty.
Or call. I say comment.
Comment.
Yes.
You can make a comment. We're ready. This week, we're going to talk about Jeremiah was a prophet. He was an old friend of mine. Okay, and here goes. You may recall that the Israelites didn't always get along with their neighbors, and often it was because they kept worshiping strange gods and idols. You may remember that it got so bad that King Nebuchadnezzar took over Judah. We call that the Babylonian captivity. Well, in the last chapter, we learned about the famous prophet Isaiah. We talked about him last week, who lived and prophesied 100 years before this Babylonian captivity. Well, it was a tough time for Judah, because for about 30 years, no one heard any messages from God. Now, just like today, there's always someone who thinks no one heard any messages at all, and that there is someone who thinks that they are speaking for God also. So, back then, there were lots of false prophets. Many of the people liked the false prophets because the false prophets oftentimes told the people only what the people wanted to hear, instead of telling them what God wanted them to hear. So, about the year 627 BC, do you remember, Betty? Maybe you can tell Victoria what we do. How we back down, we count back when we're doing BC. So in about 627 BC, a real prophet by the name of Jeremiah started talking to the people of Judah. Now you may remember that the kingdom that King David had was now divided into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. And just in case you wondered, Jeremiah's daddy was a priest. Wait a minute. What's your daddy do?
He's a priest.
He's a priest? Holy smokes, let me look there. Okay, but his name wasn't Father Casey. I can see that. Doesn't say that in the Old Testament. But you can remember that this wonderful Jeremiah's daddy was a priest, and the king of Judah at that time was King Josiah, and later on his son Jehoiakim. Let's do that one. You ready?
Jehoiakim.
Do you have anybody in your school class named Jehoiakim?
No.
No, you'd
What
remember
about
that name.
Jehoiah?
Jehoiah, well, maybe it was his nickname. And so anyway, he became king, and then his son Zedekiah became the king. So Jeremiah had a lot to say to these kings. Well, did you ever hear a priest tell you when he first felt called to be a priest? I mean, did your daddy ever say to you, I knew when I was called to be a priest?
Yeah, he said that. He told me that once.
It's fun to know things like that, to find out what happened. Well, Jeremiah was called by God to be a prophet. But at first, Jeremiah said, Lord, I don't know what to say. I'm just a young guy. Nobody will listen to a young guy. Well, but the Lord said something very beautiful to Jeremiah. God said, I want you to listen to me here, Jeremiah. Before I formed you in your mommy's tummy, I knew you. And before you were born, I had already picked you out to serve me. In fact, I selected you to be a prophet. Well, we really shouldn't argue with God, should we? So Jeremiah became a prophet, just like God said. And even though he was afraid to speak because he didn't know what to say, God told Jeremiah that he would give him the words to speak. In fact, God reached out his hand and he touched Jeremiah's mouth. And he said to him, now I have put my words in your mouth. And guess what? Not everyone is going to like the words that I have given you. So, God asked Jeremiah what he saw, and Jeremiah told him that he saw a branch of an almond tree. Next, he saw a boiling pot that was tilting away from the north. God explained to Jeremiah that he was going to call all the people of the northern kingdom, and that disaster was on its way. Remember what I said. God was really upset with his chosen people worshiping strange gods and idols. One of the messages that God gave to Jeremiah was to go towards Jerusalem and say, I remember the devotion you had when you were kids, and how much you loved me then, and how you followed me through the desert. You know that Jerusalem was holy. What did you do? Do you remember who was taking care of you? Do you remember all the wonderful things that I provided for you? And now look at you. The Lord gave Jeremiah much information to share. It all had to be written down in the book of Jeremiah. God made it clear to Jeremiah that he had to remind the people about all the good things he'd done for them in the past. And they all needed to return to worshiping him again and listening to what he had to say. One thing that God said is something we all remember even today, Victoria, or Bestie. My people are fools, and they do not know me. They are senseless children, and they do not understand anything good because they are so busy doing evil things. I think we need to ask God daily to help us not to do bad things, don't you? Yeah, we ask God to, no, we don't want to do bad things. So, God told Jeremiah to walk up and down the streets of Jerusalem with these words. But God also told Jeremiah that it was bad times in Jerusalem and that he probably would have trouble finding good people. But God went on to say, if you can find just one person who deals honestly and seeks the truth, well, you know what? I will then forgive this city. Well, not too many people were thrilled with what Jeremiah had to say. In fact, they liked the false prophets better because the false prophets let the people think that everything they were doing is wonderful. As you know, people don't like to be told when they are wrong. And they even blame the people who tried to help them with good advice. So here's the problem. Would we rather follow people who tell us how wonderful we are? It's a good question. Would we rather follow people who tell us how wonderful we are even if we aren't? Or would we rather follow people who warn us that we'll be in a whole lot of trouble if we don't change our ways?
Warn us.
Yes, warn us. Absolutely. Well, Jeremiah listened very carefully. And Jeremiah was very, very specific so that when he and God talked about the false prophets, Jeremiah could learn what God wanted him to say. God was really upset that these false prophets said that they were sent by God. God pointed out that he didn't send those prophets, that they were speaking on their own, and with their own words, they were leading more and more people away from the truth. God had said everything he could, and the people wouldn't listen. So, he told Jeremiah that he was going to send 4 different kinds of destroyers: death, the sword, starvation, and captivity. Now, that means going to capture them. Maybe. He didn't say that one, but I wouldn't be surprised. Yep, that could come in there. Bad stuff, right? So these are the 4 things that are going to happen. Now, you understand that the people brought this on themselves. Because if they'd only obeyed God, none of these bad things would have ever happened. But the problem is that when God created us, he gave us a gift, and it's called free will. Which means that we can even turn our backs on God and disobey him. Because of this gift of free will that we have, we can say yes to God, or we can say no to God. In other words, he created us to be different from a robot. We are different from a robot.
Hello,
because
I'm Betty Bot.
That's right. Yes. Betty B. Jones. But with a robot, somebody has to have controls, right? And they get to control the robot. Well, you know what?
The controls break and then it goes crazy.
That's right. That's exactly right. It can go crazy because robots.
Glass of water.
Yes, and all of your circuits are fried. So what happens here is the robot can only work according to the controls. But God didn't create us to be a robot. God created us to have an opportunity to say yes or no to good things and unfortunately bad things. So most of the 52 chapters in the book of Jeremiah are all about God giving Jeremiah some very important information that he's supposed to tell everybody to whom God sends. And have you ever heard the saying, don't shoot the messenger? Have you ever heard that? What that means is sometimes if somebody says, I've got some bad news for you, instead of getting upset with the bad news, they get upset with the person who said, I've got bad news. Well, because Jeremiah took the messages of God to the people, if the people didn't like the message, they threatened to kill Jeremiah. And all Jeremiah was doing was taking the truth that God gave him, directly to the people who needed to hear it. But since the people didn't see or hear God, often because they were so busy doing what they felt like doing, the only one they could see was Jeremiah. And they hated what he was saying. Because if they listened and believed him, then they would have to change. Some people simply do not want to change. Some people would rather be in trouble with God than to be in trouble with their friends and family. But we won't always have our friends and families, will we? So we must always listen to the one who created everything, including us.
Everything and everyone.
Absolutely everything and everyone. That's right. Sometimes Jeremiah became sad when people didn't listen. But he loved the people. And occasionally God would give Jeremiah messages that helped people realize that they needed to get ready for something really big that would happen. This is a remarkable one. I can't wait to tell you. Once God said to Jeremiah, the days are coming when I will do everything I said I promised to do for the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And this is what I love. He went on to say, what is coming is that I will make a spectacular branch sprout from David's family tree. And what he will do is going to be right and wonderful. In fact, when this happens, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will be in safety. This sprout will be called the Lord our righteousness. Think about that. Think about this. Now you know every now and then we need some encouragement. And for many, many years, people kept talking about these sentences. Can you imagine who God was telling Jeremiah would come someday. If it comes from David, and it becomes a sprout, and it comes out. Remember last week we talked about the stump of Jesse?
Yes.
And then we talked about David.
I wasn't there.
I know, but that's okay.
Rose and then.
Yeah, and to remember something about what happened when we said what the city of David was called. The city of David is Bethlehem, and something very special would happen one day in Bethlehem. Jesus would be born in the city of David in Bethlehem. And that's what Jeremiah was talking about. Now, it sounds like Jeremiah was all by himself sometimes, and he was, but every now and then he had a buddy, and one of his buddies was called Baruch. Let's hear you say it. Baruch.
Baruch. Oh! Oh no. Sorry.
I am sorry, everybody. We had just a little technical difficulty there. So one of his buddies was named Baruch. And so, Baruch was like a secretary or administrative assistant, and he wrote down many things that Jeremiah dictated to him. Baruch even took the scrolls he was writing on, since in those days people didn't write books. They wrote scrolls that were pages that rolled up. And he read them at the Lord's temple. Now, some officials believed that these words were super important, and so they asked Baruch if Jeremiah had really dictated these words. Well, of course. Baruch told them that they were God's words from Jeremiah, so these officials could see that not only Baruch was in trouble, but also Jeremiah would be in trouble. So they told Baruch to go and get Jeremiah, and they both better had leave town quickly and go hide out somewhere. Baruch then left the scroll with the undersecretary, and then he left quickly. The officials then went to the king and told him everything that they had heard. And the king sent a messenger named Jehudi. Go ahead, let's do that name again. Jehudi. Yeah, that's right.
That sounds funny.
I know it. Would you like it if your name were Victoria Jehudi? What about Betty Jehudi? No, all right. So, they sent a messenger named Jehudi to go and get the scroll. Well, it was wintertime, and the king had a nice fire going in his royal fireplace. And he told Jehudi to read the scroll. The king apparently didn't like what he heard, and so after every few chapters that were read, he took out his knife and he cut the scroll, and he threw the paper into the fireplace, and it burned up.
I thought you were talking about he cut somebody.
No.
I thought that you were gonna say like he cut himself.
I know what you'd think that, but that was not. He didn't like the words he heard, so he cut them off and he threw it in the fireplace.
Okay, everyone.
Why do you have to take it that far?
I know it. Talk about anger.
He was like, okay, today everyone, we are going to cut a scroll. So what you're gonna do is go like this, very nicely.
You're gonna go like that.
And now you're gonna go very nicely on the words so they can cut off.
Do you have to go to Michael's to buy those supplies or not?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the king then told his people to go and to find Baruch and Jeremiah and arrest them. But you may remember that they were in hiding. But God wanted everyone to know what was on his mind. So he told Jeremiah to get another scroll, a blank scroll, and start writing down everything that was in the burnt up scroll. God was not happy with these people, with the king. And when Jeremiah was finished dictating to Baruch, God even added a few more words. God made it clear that the king and his family would be in big trouble. A new king came along named, ready? Zedekiah. That's right. And the next thing you know, Jeremiah was arrested and put in a cell for a long time. Eventually, the king sent for Jeremiah, and asked him if God had given Jeremiah any messages lately. Well, God had given Jeremiah a message. Are you ready for it? The message was that King Zedekiah would be handed over to the king of Babylon.
Hey, dear God.
Not good news.
No, but he was like, you are going to this person.
That's right. So Jeremiah told King Zedekiah that he thought it was wrong that he was arrested, especially since King Zedekiah's prophets never told the truth, and they were never arrested for what they had to say. Well, apparently the king saw the logic of that argument, and he let Jeremiah be in the courtyard and to eat some of the bread from the bakers. But remember I told you that the people didn't want any more bad news? So, they convinced the king to put Jeremiah in a pit in the ground. No water, no food. But that didn't last too long, and he was brought back. But the king was scared, and he sent for Jeremiah. King Zedekiah said, now I want you to tell me the truth. Jeremiah said, ha! If I tell you the truth, you won't like it, and you'll kill me. The king promised that he wouldn't kill Jeremiah, but he still didn't like what Jeremiah had to say. In fact, things went from bad to worse for King Zedekiah. Sadly for the people, it was a miserable time. If only they had listened to Jeremiah instead of the false prophets. God kept on speaking to Jeremiah. And there were many prophecies that were for many nations. And there was some really bad news for Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar captured 3,023 Jews in 1 year. And then a year later, took 832 people from Jerusalem. And even later, 745 Jews were taken with a total of 4,600 people. Now, here's something to think about. Got to think carefully. Listen carefully to this. Are you ready? Can you receive this message?
Yes.
And here it is. In the 37th year of the exile, which included Jehoiakim, king of Judah, when Marduk became the king of Babylon, he released King Jehoiakim, and this is the day he released him. On the 25th day of the 12th month. On the 25th day.
On Christmas?
That's right. And he didn't even know it was Christmas. So, in the end, King Jehoiakim was treated with respect. Remember, girls, there's a lot of false prophets in this world. Make sure you listen to the real and true prophets, just like Jeremiah.